everyone's list is going to be either pumpkin pie or pecan pie. And the only possible contender to like dethrone these kings of desserts, queens of desserts, would be a brownie or a blondie or a brownie a la mode or whatever, some kind of like cakey cookie combination thing like this, which is just a favorite all year round, which is the only reason it even stands a chance because let's be real, pecan pie and pumpkin pie, there is nothing wrong with either of them. But what happens if you squish together pumpkin pie, pecan pie, and a blondie / a shortbread cookie? You get pumpkin pecan streusel bars, which is what we're making today. It is like a layered combination of beautiful buttery shortbread, delightful spiced pumpkin filling, pecan crumble streusel all over the top. It's crunchy, it's luscious, there's a crisp cookie bottom. It literally couldn't be better, and it's really easy to make. So, hello favorite fall dessert. The first thing we're gonna do is make a beautiful shortbread base for these sort of cookie bar amalgamations, alchemy, by starting with some butter. Butter into the bowl. So a stick and a half of unsalted butter, softened to just about room temperature is what we want. And I'm going to beat that together with a half cup of light brown sugar packed into the bowl. And just beat that till it's light and fluffy. Should take 2 to 3 minutes with your stand mixer or your hand mixer. Okay, so once it's starting to look nice and lovely and fluffy like so, just go ahead and scrape down the bowl just to make sure no butter or sugar is hiding out on there. Then you're gonna add about a teaspoon, maybe a splash extra of vanilla extract. Quickly beat that in. And then we'll want a cup and a half of all-purpose flour. And you'll notice there's no leavening agent in here, no baking soda, no baking powder, because we don't actually want this layer to puff. We're looking for a nice, crumbly, buttery, tender, little sort of shortbread crust at the bottom. And then we will add a little leavener to the filling. So you get a little puff, but not too much. So, cup and a half. And I do find this recipe is somewhat more forgiving than other baking, which is maybe why I love it so much. All right, mix that together till it's just combined. Pinch of salt. And as soon as it starts to pull together into a ball, which this is kind of doing right now, I stop my mixing and just finish the rest by quickly just pressing any flour that's left around the edges of the bowl into the batter. But there really isn't much. It all came together quite nicely. It's just shortbread, but it's very good. Okay, you're gonna wanna bake this in, I like it in a square baking dish like so. I find a nonstick pan like this does make it a little easier to release the bars once they're cooked. Another helpful thing for releasing the cooked bars is to butter the pan really generously, especially in the corners where I always seem to find my baked goods like to stick. And once the entire surface is buttered, we're also gonna line it with some parchment paper, and that will just help you lift it out without any issue. I gotta tell you, I had these like nail extensions put on over the summer because I think they're beautiful and make your fingers look so elegant and lovely. And I was so curious about them, so I had them put on and they did look phenomenal. But doing things like this was impossible. Putting face cream on was impossible. So in another lifetime, I will devote myself to learning how to navigate that. One other thing I do like to do is I'll press the parchment paper into our buttered baking dish, and that just kind of coats the bottom of it with a little bit of butter. Then I flip it, and suddenly you have both sides of your parchment paper buttered. Just press your dough with your very slippery, buttery hands. Press your dough into the baking dish to form a crust of even width. So we're looking probably for maybe somewhere between a half an inch and an inch. And I just play Play-Doh. This is the part my children like to help with. Obviously, very little dough remains when I let them play this part because they eat it all as they're going. Once you are at a lovely, even thickness, I would say it's about 1/2 inch. You don't want the crust too thick because you do want it to get nice and tender and crisp as it bakes. But it needs to be thick enough to be sturdy for your filling and your topping. It's gonna look like this. And then you're gonna take it to a 350-degree oven, about like 12 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes. And what you're looking for is for the crust to be lightly golden brown, pretty well set, like 3/4 of the way baked. It'll bake a little bit more in the oven with the filling, but we want it pretty well set. And again, the fragrance, the essence of like caramelizing sugar and butter. Always a good sign. Okay, using your same bowl, let's go ahead and make this pumpkin filling. And this, in a perfect world, would begin with 1 cup of pureed, freshly roasted or steamed pumpkin flesh. I didn't have time to do that, so this is canned pumpkin, which will obviously still work and will still be really delicious. But if, say, you had been to the pumpkin patch, or for some reason you find yourself overwhelmed by fresh, beautiful pumpkins, then you should definitely roast or steam them and peel them and puree them, and you will get gorgeous pumpkin puree that you can use to make this recipe truly top-notch. This method, however, out of the can makes it much faster. So you win both ways. In this bowl, I have a 1/3 cup of light brown sugar, a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. That's just gonna help this sort of custardy filling set up. 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder and a little pinch of salt. And I'm actually gonna add my spices in at this point as well. We know your girl loves some cardamom. This is my queen of spices, so I go kind of heavy on the cardamom, but you don't have to if you don't love it as much as I do. Cinnamon, I feel like probably everyone's non-negotiable here. Quite delightful, very warming, gives it that wonderful fall essence. You can also just use a pumpkin pie spice blend, which has cloves and allspice and some ginger in it usually, so all very delicious. And then just take your whisk and mix these dry ingredients together until they are crumbly and combined. Add in our could have been fresh pumpkin puree, 2 eggs, oh, and a splash of vanilla because I still have her out, and I feel like why not? A little vanilla always boosts the flavor up in our sweet cooking. And then just mix it all together, and you will be left with a perfectly not too sweet pumpkin filling. Do take a little moment just to whisk it well because I didn't lightly beat those eggs before I put them in, and you want to fully incorporate them and let them build a little bit of structure. All right, that looks great. Our cookie crust is almost ready. Our pumpkin filling is done. Now it's time to make the crumbly, delightful pecan streusel topping. Obviously we need some pecans for that, about 1/3 cup. And you know what, let's play a fun game because Daphne's eyes are sometimes a little overly generous. This was my eyeball of 1/3 cup. Let's see how she did. Oh my gosh. 1/3 cup plus a few. Okay, it's okay. No one ever complained about too many pecans in this mix. And just give them a rough chop. These are just raw pecan halves. You can use obviously pieces because we're just gonna chop them up. All right, 1/4 cup of light brown sugar, 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 1/3 cup of old-fashioned rolled oats, a tiny pinch of salt, and 1/3 cup of pecans. And then we are going to grab a stick of butter that is in the freezer because you want really, really, really cold butter, a 1/2 stick going into here. But before we do that, I smell the cookies and I'm not going to risk letting them burn. So get your perfectly golden brown crust out just in time to admire it. This is why you have to use all your senses when it comes to cooking. I like to cook with abandon. I really do like to improvise and be kind of wild and crazy in the kitchen, but you can only do that if you're using all your senses so that something is reminding you to check back into the reality and the rules. Freezing cold butter, you want 1/2 stick to pinch and layer into the crumbly topping here. So you can dice it up and just sort of pinch it in the way that you would for pie dough, or you can grate it in using a microplane, which will speed along your pinching process. This is just shy of frozen, so it actually is working really well. If it's too soft, it would fall apart in your hands, and if it was too hard, it would not grate down nicely. But this is working very well. Okay, you know what to do. Just toss and scatter that butter together with the flour, the nuts, the rolled oats, that little bit of light brown sugar, and then you kind of want to pinch them so the butter starts to melt a little bit and really binds together all the other dry ingredients If your butter is slightly softer than mine was, you don't need to do the grating part. You can just pinch it right in. But ultimately, you will be left with this really delicious looking crumbly streusel topping, which is going to cook and caramelize and get really crisp and golden brown on top of these beautiful bars. All right, that's it. You know, this feels like it really, it could taste terrible. I should probably taste it. Get your cookie bar base, which had a chance to cool ever so slightly while I was making the streusel topping. Layer on your pumpkin filling. Ooh, I get that cardamom, I got that cinnamon as it hits the hot surface. Yum! And just give that a spread over the surface of this base. And then you know what we're gonna do. Cover it up with a generous sprinkle of the streusel. I put like a base layer of just a sprinkle down, and then I come back and kind of squish it in my hands, and that is gonna be what gives you those kind of lovely, larger chunks that get really golden brown and crackly. And this is definitely one of those desserts that like, you're gonna make it once or twice and then you'll memorize it and you will just be making it all season long. Delightful. Okay, back into our 350-degree oven, another 30, maybe 35 minutes or so. The top will be golden brown and crisped. The cookie layer at the base will be set. And we will be in business. The bars have finished cooking. I let them rest. 10 minutes in the tray. And then you lift so seamlessly with that lovely parchment paper that we put on. Look at the golden brown crust on here. Yum. Okay. Let us begin the slice. Nice little lovely squares. And behold, shortbread layer, pumpkin layer, pecan crumble layer, flaky, buttery, crumbly, delightful. You have those wonderful crunchy textures from the crumble itself, and also check out that crust. All right, let's taste it. Ooh, the cookie layer is melting in my mouth. The pumpkin layer is flavoring the whole thing, also melting in my mouth. And then the crumbly, crunchy topping, giving a nice little bit to bite in on. It is that perfect combination of pumpkin pie and pecan pie with a cookie element to it. I'm not sure why anyone would make you choose one dessert that was your favorite for fall, but if they made you, you have my permission to say was this.